Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on how leaders in education are leveraging text messaging to communicate better. We will just give folks a couple more minutes to file in from the waiting room, and we will get going. So just another minute or two. All right, well, why don't we get going? Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for spending your afternoons with us. If you're in any time zone except Pacific, and if you are in the Pacific, thanks for spending your late morning with us. So today's topic is how leaders in education are leveraging text messaging to better communicate. And just by way of introduction, my name is Martin Payne. I will be your host today. I'm the CEO of TextUs, and I've been with the company now for coming on approaching 2 years here pretty soon, and really have a lot of insights to share with you. TextUs serves customers in an assortment of verticals. Higher education is one of them. And we really like to study best practices to help our clients engage with their customers in a way that just drives better response rate, just better overall engagement. And we have some data and some insights here that we think can help you put some things into practice that will allow you to do so. So specifically around communication overall, but just texting very specifically about optimizing the response rates there. And towards the end, we will have really best practices, about 5 or so, a handful of best practices that you can take back with you and hopefully implement right away. Feel free to shoot me questions during the webinar, and we can handle questions as they come up to make the conversation a bit more interactive, and so happy to incorporate those as we move through. So I always like to start by just explaining the difference really between texting and other media, specifically email. So texting is both a conversation and a messaging medium, whereas email is predominantly a messaging medium. It's fairly difficult to have a conversation really with somebody over email, just given the nature of email and just given the nature of how often people check their email inboxes. I mean, people are checking email inboxes. Typically, it's measured in hours, typically, whereas people are checking their phones and checking whether they got a message. Typically, it's measured in minutes. And so it's much better medium for actually having more of a live conversation and near real-time conversation. And so because of that, the response rates that we see in texting are quite a bit higher. Like the average response rate that we see in schools and education is 37.5%. So pretty high response rate there. Whereas, you look at email, typically texting versus email is anywhere from a 7.5. We see upwards of a 10 times higher response rate when texting is in use versus email. Some of the other reasons here that SMS is just preferred by most people, but particularly students these days, is it's a live medium. When you SMS text somebody, people are expecting another human being to be on the other end of that, and for that human being to be paying attention to the text messages they receive and to be responding in near real time. 98% of all SMS messages are read compared to only 20 emails. Big part of that is because about half of the emails that we receive are spam. So really great medium just overall for really high engagement, particularly with the younger generations. So some definitions here before we get into the slides that provide insights and data. A user is someone using the TextUs platform to engage applicants, students, etc. A contact is someone, a user of the TextUs platform that they want to reach out to. This is typically an applicant, student, or parent. A conversational text message is a text message sent from one user to one or few contacts. It's usually a text message that has been like custom crafted and really personalized for the contact. An automated text message is more of a broadcast text message that really more often than not comes from a template and it's sent to a group of people, typically a larger group of people. And you'll see the term response rate quite a bit. And it's merely the ratio of text received by a contact divided by the text sent by a user. So those are the standard definitions here that you'll see throughout the remaining dozen or so slides here. So if you look at response rate by industry, so we've got several industries that we serve, and you take education as a sector, the 37.5% average response rate that we see is slightly better than the average for all other industries that we serve. And so the question is, well, okay, well, why is that the case? Aside from the fact that texting is just generally speaking a more engaging medium than email. Well, if you start to take a look at how education versus other industries text their constituents, it's mostly conversational texting. So it's about a little over 60% conversational in education versus a little less than 40% automated texting that occurs there. Whereas when you look at other industries, it's more of a 50-50 split in terms of conversational, more one-to-one texting, much more personalized texting versus automated texting, which can be personalized, but tends to be driven off of a template and is intended for a broader audience. So you do lose some personalization when that happens. And because of the degree of personalization and just the nature of one-to-one conversational texting overall, you see the difference in response rate here can be pretty dramatic, actually. You're talking on the order of a 4 times difference in response rate. So over on the education side of the ledger here, conversational texting gets on average a 54% response rate. So one response coming in from a contact for every 2 messages sent out by users. That's pretty high. It's very comparable to what we see in other industries that approaches about 58% response rate for conversational texting. Automated texting in education is about 14%, just a hair under 14%. It's a bit higher in other industries at about 20%. And so this isn't, we say this because we want you to know what the differences are in response rates so that you can use automated text really at the right time in the right way relative to conversational text, meaning both are good, both have their right application, their right use case. And we bring it up because really when used well, the automated texting helps fuel and drive the conversational texting. Like you might use automated texting when you're at the very top of the funnel and you're dealing with prospects who might be potential applicants to your school, for example. You might send more of a broadcast text out to that kind of a group. And then as folks within that broadcast show interest, you engage them more on a one-to-one basis. That's really an example of what we're talking about here. They work very well in complementary fashion. You just want to use them in balance. You don't want to over-index on the automated texting, obviously, because it's just got a lower response rate there. And as you can see, this is a very simple correlation analysis that we run between your overall response rate and the degree to which you use conversational texting. And you can see there's almost a 1, which is as high of a positive correlation that you can get is +1, while conversational texting has a positive 0.94. So it's nearly 1 in terms of the correlation it has with overall response rate. And conversely, automated texting has almost a -1 correlation. So it's almost inversely correlated to response rate, which basically means if you overuse automated texting, it's really going to drive your response rate pretty far down because of the data that we showed earlier, as well as just how it plays out. You know, people expect texting to be with a live human being, and when they're getting automated text, they just know that they're not interacting with a live human on the other end, and so it kind of violates, if you will, the social pact that we have with texting. And so really the main message is don't overuse automated texting. Use it as a way to drive people into more of a conversational texting engagement, and that's really how you drive up the overall response rate of your texting solution. So we have, this is something we actually just talked about. This is with other industries. Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, it's really a similar statement here, just perhaps just reiterating the fact that conversational texting is very important here. So now let's take a look at the effect that message length has on response rate. So the yellow is the message length of messages that users send to contacts. And as you can see, the majority of the messages are 200 characters and above. That's what the x-axis means there. So 201 characters or above is the length of messages. You know, 54% of messages that get sent out are 201 characters or above. On the flip side, you know, 50 characters or less represent 6.6% of the messages that get sent by users in the education sector. Now, on the flip side, the messages that come in from your students or your prospective students, 64% of those messages coming back in are 50 characters or less. It's almost the mirror image of you know, the length of messages going out. Well, you might ask yourself, well, okay, well, why is that important? And this is really why it's important, is if you look at response rate of messages that fall into the various message length buckets that you see here, messages that get sent out that are 0 to 50 characters on average have a 62% response rate. On the flip side, messages that get sent out that have 201 characters or more get a 15% response rate. And so this is a very common usage pattern that we see. Most folks take their users are used to using email. And so a lot of times they will take messages that are designed for email, copy and paste them over into texting, and you end up with a pretty long message. Well, that's not necessarily a message that's going to drive the best engagement, because when you're looking at texting, really the best convention there is you want short, frequent text messages in near real time. And so something that's a really long message just isn't going to play well in a medium that really isn't designed for it, number one. And the social expectation out there is like, hey, I'm not going to read a super long message here or engage with a super long message on my phone. And so makes a big difference. You know, take a little bit more time to write a shorter message, and the payoff is pretty significant. I mean, it's a 4 times difference between the shortest message and the longest message here in terms of response rate. And fortunately, though, it's one of the easiest things to correct. The other dimension we'll take a look at here is the number of messages that a user has to send out before a contact actually sends the response back. And What's nice about this, and I think it speaks to the power of the medium, is 89%, almost 90% of your responses will come back after the first message. So if you're going to get a response, 90% of those responses will come after the first message. So that's really good, right? But in order to maximize your response rate, there is a bit of a tail here, meaning you do get additional responses in the second and third text that you send out. And so if you stick with it, if you send one message, you don't get a response, it's actually worth it for you to send out a second message and a third message, because you can actually get material amount of responses in that second or third text message that you send out if you haven't heard back from the contact on the first message that you send. This is a look at information around users and what hour of the day they're sending out messages. And so if you look at a typical day, this tells you what percentage of messages sent during that day gets sent in an hour of the day. And what you can see here is that you start to see a material uptick at around the 8th hour of the day, so about 8 o'clock, and it gradually increases. You hit peak at mid to late morning, and then it goes down a little bit midday and down a little bit more in the afternoon. But the general theme here is that people are texting, generally speaking, throughout the day. Are there peaks? Yeah, there are peaks, but it's generally speaking fairly substantial text messaging that occurs throughout the day, which speaks, I think, to the real-time nature of just texting in general. Now, if you look at the contacts that are receiving those texts, so in the case of education here, you're talking parents, you're talking students, you're talking applicants, very similar story. I mean, the contacts here in education are interacting with those texts and sending texts in response really throughout the day. Which I think is just proof positive to the fact that texting is a near real-time communication medium that's just really good for engaging people, and the level of engagement actually just happens, all throughout the day. It's one of the reasons I think why texting is just growing as a category more and more for businesses or institutions that want to contact their customers or their stakeholders. And here's a more granular look really at response time. So the y-axis is the percent of responses. The x-axis here is hours since the first message was sent. So maybe said another way, how long does it take for you to get your response once you've sent your message? And if you look at our population here in education as a whole, you can see that once education users send out that message, 70% of the responses they get back occur within the first 2 hours. So that's pretty fast response. And then you eventually get to there's a very long tail here that occurs. But generally speaking, the rule of thumb is within the first couple of hours, the vast majority of responses are going to come into you. So you really want to have your texting application open on the ready, because folks are going to, generally speaking, going to respond pretty quickly here. And here's another look is by day of the week. It's not surprising that most of the data here shows that middle of the week, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and by the way, this is ordered just in terms of most to least, as opposed to day of the week. And so Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so middle days of the week really get the highest percentages of text messages sent. So this looks at total text messages that get sent on average during a week, what percentage of those messages get sent out by day or received by day. And you can see those middle 3 days get the most messages sent and the most messages received. The bookends of the weekdays, so Monday and Friday, are really the next tier down in terms of messages, percentage of messages sent and received, and then very little on the weekends. So probably meets your intuition, I would suspect, in the education sector. It definitely met mine. This is a look at response time. So the average number of minutes that you get a response back from somebody by day of the week. This was a bit surprising. Like I would expect the response time to be fairly equal among the days, and it is Tuesday through Saturday. As a matter of fact, Saturdays is the fastest response time. But I was a little surprised to see how slow Monday was for sure. And then Sunday, it's like, forget about it. You know, not a good time to be sending out text messages when you want near real-time engagement. You know, you're looking there at an average of 2 hours for a response, whereas for the other days, I mean, you're anywhere between 12 and 13 minutes, you know, except for Monday, you're looking more like at 23 minutes. So if you want engagement, you want rapid engagement, Tuesday through Saturday appear to be your days in education. So if we boil this down to, you know, what should you do in order to best leverage texting? So we just mentioned Saturday's your best bet for fastest response time, but not by much. Actually, Tuesday through Friday is pretty darn fast too. It's 12 to 13 minutes. Just remember that 70% of your engagement, meaning the responses that you get, 70% of those are going to come within the first 2 hours. And chances are they're going to come, you know, there's a pretty good chance they'll come within minutes as well. So use a texting platform that has apps that allow you to text from anywhere in your workday, anywhere in your workflow, because you just don't know when they're going to come in, but you know they're going to come in throughout the day, and you know folks are going to be responding fairly quickly. So you want to look for a texting solution that has something like a Chrome extension or some kind of a widget that would allow you to see messages coming in while you're working in other systems like your CRM system. And then once that message comes in, you don't want to have to click over to some new application, some other application to do the texting. You actually want that Chrome extension, that slide out, to work within your CRM and be integrated with your CRM, so that if you're looking at a contact profile or an applicant profile, you literally can pull the number from that profile and text that person right there as if you're in your CRM, but it's really a widget that floats on top of the CRM. Much more efficient that way. A mobile app for when you're on the go. Because like I said, you literally could get a response back in minutes. And when you get a response back, you want to respond back, you know, in similar timely fashion. So mobile app's really important there, and it should be a native mobile app, because a native mobile app, you're going to be able to receive push notifications that you do have a message that's just come in. And then a web app. Web app's great for texting a lot of contacts in a short amount of time. So it's really good for setting up automated texting and broadcasting those messages to a large group of people. So best practice number 3, if you don't get a response after your first message, send a second and a third message, because you can gain another 20% in response rate by doing so. And just remember, the conversational texting has about 4 times the response rate of automated texting. So try to make it about 60% of your communications overall, if not more. But and use it in complementary fashion to drive people towards the conversational texting. So use them in unison with one another, where the automated texting creates conversations and moves people towards the conversational texting part of the customer journey, or the student journey in this case. Really try to keep your text messages to less than 100 characters. Trust me, it is worth the time. So I think it was Thomas Payne that wrote the famous phrase, "Give me more time and I'll write you a shorter letter." It definitely pays off here in text messaging. Spend a little bit more time, write a shorter text message, and you can see upwards of 3 to 4 times higher response rate. Do not copy and paste from email or something like that. Or if you are going to copy and paste, make sure that you edit it and you trim it down so that it's very text appropriate and it's just shortened to the point. And last but not least, the biggest driver towards just getting high engagement and high response rate is getting your users, once you've adopted a texting solution, just get your users to adopt and use the system. And so the education, the training, the incentives that you put in place to get users to actually start using texting in lieu of the phone or in addition to phone or email, super important. Because let's just say one person on a team of 10 starts texting and they get a 40% response rate, but 9 out of 10 team members keep using email. The team's aggregate response rate is going to be 7.6%. So as a team, you're not really getting the full benefits if only a few people have adopted the texting solution. Whereas if you look at the example below, if you get 9 out of 10 people texting and getting a 40% average response rate, with only say one person who's the laggard, just won't change their ways, want to keep using email, but still 9 out of 10 results in a 36.4 aggregate response rate for your team. That's why adoption is just so key. So adoption, and then once you get people adopting, you get them trained up on these best practices that we're talking about to drive the response rate from 36% to something even higher, which is readily achievable through the use of texting, like you've seen some of the insights prove there early in the presentation. So if adoption's key, what do you need to look for in a texting solution? Should be really intuitive, really easy to use. There should be tight integration with your CRM system, which is typically the master source of truth for contact data. And so that contact sharing between the two systems is critical for getting people to adopt. The other thing that's important there too is the texting system, as it sends out messages, should post those messages back to the CRM system. So when you look at the contact record, you can see all the text messages that have been sent and received for this contact just in that contact record there. So you have a holistic view of all the communications that are occurring with that person. And then showing results via insights and analytics by team and by user is also going to be key to getting people to adopt, but then also getting folks to adopt in a way that is best practice. So that is it for the webinar. If you have any questions, now would be a great time to post those, and I'd be happy to answer your questions that you present here. Don't be shy now. Texting to students is pretty new, so there's no questions that are out of bounds here. So Travis says, do we have a sample campaign yet? Absolutely, we do. If you go to our website, we have text templates that you can use there. I think it's 101. And those are templates that are readily usable in a campaign. So yeah, feel free to just go to our website and just, we've got a good resource center there, and there are templates that you can use there. Any other questions? All right, well, if not, we've recorded this webinar. Everyone who registered will get access to this webinar. And like I said, we've got great resources on our website that you can go ahead and use. We've got a request here from Nancy to send out the deck. We'd be happy to send out the deck as well. So thanks for asking there, Nancy. But really appreciate your time. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.